You know that feeling when you walk into a movie halfway through and you have absolutely no idea what's going on? Well, if you've ever tried to read through the historical and prophetic texts of the Bible, you know it can feel exactly like that. It's this incredibly intense, complicated narrative. Who is talking? Who are they warning? Wait, which empire is attacking now? Today, we are bringing order to that chaos. Think of this explainer as your ultimate study guide. We're going to visually map out the notoriously complex timeline of the biblical prophets, drawing from an absolutely fantastic historical breakdown. By the time we finish, you're going to have a crystal clear, chronological framework to understand exactly where each of these figures fits into the big picture. Okay, let's dive right into this. Our agenda today covers 1. A kingdom divided, 2. Period 1. Assyrian Invasions, 3. Period 2. Babylonian Conquest, 4. Period 3, Persian Return, and finally, 5, Core Themes, Judgment and Restoration. So, basically, our syllabus today chunks the massive history of these prophets into 3 distinct, empire-defined eras, sandwiched between the root cause of the conflict and the ultimate core themes. But before we map the chronology, we really need to know who we're talking about, right? The source material identifies exactly 16 prophets who have their own dedicated books in the Bible. Now, you might have heard them categorized as the 4 major prophets and the 12 minor prophets. And a quick aside on that, minor definitely doesn't mean their messages were less important or that they were the JV team. It literally just means their books are a lot shorter in length. It's incredibly fascinating how the source frames the actual job description of a biblical prophet. I mean, you can scratch the whole fortune teller with a crystal ball image. According to the text, they were solitary and honestly often deeply unpopular messengers. They stood completely alone against the grain of society to call people back to their covenant with God. They were directly confronting rampant idol worship, political corruption, and systemic injustice, warning loudly that if the people refused to turn back, severe judgment was coming for sure. Section 1. A kingdom divided, the root of the problem. So, to understand why these 16 messengers were even needed in the first place, we have to zoom out. We have to look at the macro-level history, starting with the catalyst of King Solomon's death in 930 BC. Under King Saul, David, and Solomon, the nation of Israel had actually been united. But when Solomon died, the kingdom tragically split right in two, Israel in the north and Judah in the south. And both of these newly divided kingdoms almost immediately began straying from their foundational laws. They started practicing injustice and adopting the idolatry of all their neighboring nations. And this, right here, kicks off a timeline that's going to lead us through the rise and fall of the Assyrian, Babylonian, and Persian empires, all the way down to a massive shift in 2980. Section 2, Period 1, Assyrian Invasions. So, from the mid-9th century until 612 BC, Assyria, with its infamous capital Nineveh, was the most powerful and violently feared nation on earth. The looming threat of this brutal empire just dominates the messages of the early prophets. 7 distinct prophets operated during this terrifying era. You have Jonah, who was sent straight into the lion's den of the Assyrian capital. There's Amos, get this, a shepherd and fig farmer who bravely stood up and condemned the wealthy elites in Samaria. Hosea's entire life was actually a living metaphor. He married an unfaithful woman just to illustrate Israel's unfaithfulness. Meanwhile, Isaiah and Micah were busy warning Judah while promising a future ruler. And finally, Zephaniah and Nahum warned of the coming day of the Lord while reassuring Judah that Nineveh's cruel reign would eventually hit a wall. But here's the heartbreaking part. Despite all these passionate warnings from prophets like Amos and Hosea, the northern kingdom of Israel simply did not change course. The historical breakdown reveals a really tragic outcome. In 722 BC, the violent Assyrian Empire swept in, totally destroyed the northern kingdom, and deported its inhabitants. The warnings were completely ignored, and the brutal consequences became a stark reality. Section 3, Period 2, Babylonian Conquest. With the north completely gone, the narrative focus shifts entirely to the surviving southern kingdom of Judah. Assyria falls, and a brand new, dominant superpower steps onto the world stage, Babylon. And this brilliantly illustrates how changing geopolitics directly shaped the actual messages of the prophets. Think about it. During the Assyrian era, the prophets were dealing with the immediate, visceral threat of violent invasion. But as Babylon rises, the prophetic focus completely shifts to a new kind of trauma. Now they're dealing with the devastating reality of total displacement, the destruction of Jerusalem, and a long-term, agonizing exile far away from their homeland. To really wrap our heads around this Babylonian period, we need to do a deep dive into its two most prominent voices, Jeremiah and Ezekiel. Let's look at them side by side. Both were priests, but their circumstances literally worlds apart. Jeremiah, famously known as the weeping prophet, was stationed right inside the walls of Jerusalem. For 40 years, he endured severe persecution as he desperately tried to tell a stubborn people that Babylon was coming to take them away. Ezekiel, on the other hand, was already taken into exile in Babylon. From way outside the homeland, he used incredibly dramatic sign acts and these powerful, surreal visions to explain why Jerusalem was falling. But crucially, he was also offering hope that one day, God would give the people new hearts. Alongside Jeremiah and Ezekiel, we have three other crucial figures in this era. Habakkuk is super fascinating because he actually wrestles with God, asking, how could you possibly use an evil empire like Babylon to judge Judah? Obadiah specifically calls out the neighboring nation of Edom for taking advantage of Judah when they were down. And then there's Daniel. Daniel provides a totally different perspective. Taken as a youth, he serves faithfully right in the heart of Babylon's royal court for over 70 years. He's in there interpreting King Nebuchadnezzar's dreams and mapping out the rise and fall of 4 future empires. A real game changer.
Section 4, Period 3, Persian Return, which brings us to the next massive geopolitical pivot.
In 539 BC, the Persian leader Cyrus overthrows Babylon and, remarkably, allows the exiled Jews to return home to Judah. Now, you'd think finally returning home would spark this massive spiritual revival, right? Well, the text reveals a very different reality. The new prophets in this era faced a completely different beast. It wasn't an invading army this time. It was spiritual apathy. It was deep, entrenched cynicism. The returned exiles were super busy building comfortable, paneled houses for themselves, all while leaving the central place of worship, the temple, in absolute ruins. To combat this widespread apathy, 4 final prophets step up to the plate. Haggai bluntly challenges the people, basically saying, get your priorities straight and rebuild the temple right now. Zechariah uses a wild series of 8 vivid night visions to assure them that God is in fact building a glorious new kingdom. Joel uses the terrifying imagery of a locust plague to urge repentance before the final day of the Lord. And finally, Malachi addresses a cold, cynical population, warning them to return to God, but also dropping this incredible promise that a future messenger would one day arrive to prepare the way. Section 5, Core Themes, Judgment and Restoration. So the crucial point is, after tracking all 16 of these prophets across 3 massive, world-dominating empires, what is the ultimate takeaway here? If we're using this explainer as a study guide, how do we synthesize all of this historical data? Well, the text distills the core messages of the prophets into 2 distinct balancing pillars, judgment and restoration. The prophets were absolutely unflinching in their delivery of judgment, whether they were warning about brutal empires like Assyria and Babylon or using vivid metaphors like locust plagues. They fiercely targeted idol worship, systemic injustice, and human pride. But, and this is key, they never stopped there. Balancing out that harsh accountability was an enduring, beautiful promise of restoration. They continually drove home the promise that God would preserve a faithful remnant, breathing literal life into dry bones, and establishing an ultimate, everlasting, peaceful kingdom. But here's the plot twist. As the book of Malachi closes, the age of the prophets ends on a massive 400-year cliffhanger. The biblical narrative is just left hanging in absolute suspense on this profound tension. How exactly could God execute the perfect, unyielding justice the prophets warned about, while simultaneously offering the profound forgiveness and restoration they kept promising? Well, according to the historical breakdown we're following, the theological resolution to this centuries-long silence finally occurs in the Judean desert around 29 AD. A new figure, John the Baptist, arrives as a herald, effectively shattering that 400-year gap. He announces the arrival of Jesus of Nazareth, and the source presents this exact moment as the ultimate culmination of the prophetic age. It explains that Jesus brought the long-awaited kingdom, balancing the scales of justice and grace and realizing all those ancient prophecies that Amos, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and the rest had spoken about centuries prior. We have covered a massive amount of ground today, and I really hope this structured framework has been helpful for you. By organizing these 16 distinct voices against the shifting backdrops of the Assyrian, Babylonian, and Persian empires, the chaos of the timeline just kind of disappears, doesn't it? So I want to leave you with this thought. The next time you encounter complex historical or religious literature, how can mapping out the geopolitical and chronological context completely transform your understanding of the text?
Keep seeking structure, keep asking those big questions, and keep learning.